Hi, this is Greg Young, Orange Claxon, sending you this message today from an undisclosed location. Um, Always like to be in interesting places. This week there's a few new reports that I'm really interested in. I'm a really big fan of third-party validation for things, whether they be market share, Forrester Waves, Gartner Magic Quadrants, those kinds of or test reports as well, things like from NSS Labs. Those things are really valuable to me. Now they're not the be-all and end-all, of course. They have to be put in your context, your use case. But I really like them because they can help you kind of validate sort of, where do these products fit? Are they growing in share? Are they, declining in share? Are they being beaten by others? So at least it's a starting point to kind of, assess claims. And I think that the two documents I've talked about, types, the market share versus the qualitative ones, or the sort of positioning assessment or the relative positioning, those both do very different things. So first of all, for the market share, you get a lot of claims from people, hey, we're the greatest in this, we're the greatest in that. And I like the third-party validation because they can really kind of, from at least a share perspective, show who's really doing what out there. Some of the companies, unfortunately, spend more on marketing than they do on R&D these days, meaning they're more of a marketing company than they are a security company. Once they get to that point and they cross that line, I think the claims become more difficult. Kind of like this atomic weapon behind me, supposed to be powerful, but in fact that one is made of cardboard. It's a reproduction. One of the key indicators I look for when looking at these sort of market documents, especially market share ones, is just the overall health of the market itself. So, is it growing or shrinking? One of the dangers is always if you're buying into a market that is, radically shrinking, you'd like to know that. So, just sort of the growing vendor share. Hey, our market share doubled or tripled this year. In the context of what market it's in, that's really important. You don't want to be buying sort of into older stuff, kind of like these technologies behind me here. So if some, the health of the market. But even if it's declining a bit, market, it could be reasons for that. So it could be that there's some competing technologies, could be diversification, it could be also the definition of that market as well. So part of that is also just sort of understanding the whole market dynamics. So don't just look for sort of a vendor market share. You look for the vendor, or, the overall market health, and particularly the dynamics of that market and the definitions of it. So these things kind of have to fit together. Now, the worst case scenario, of course, is a radically shrinking market and a vendor's making inflated claims about their domination of that market. And in fact, maybe they've got a shrinking share of a dying market and they don't have any alternative technologies to replace it. That's probably the worst case scenario, and you don't want to be locked into that. Um, and there's always exceptions, of course. So, especially some of the network security technologies, where depending on who's operating them, there's been some splits there, for example, between firewall and IPS. Some of the NAC technologies, if you've gone heavy into NAC, that would be an exception as well. Um, but overall, that health and definition of the market is an important thing. So, and especially diverging between the claims. So, I really like the facts of some of these reports that have come out. And there's always some surprises too. And I think if you're surprised when you look at some of these, that often doesn't indicate it's a poor report. It indicates that you maybe had some poor definitions or poor understanding of what that market may have been. So another great report that came out this week was on the share of who's generating the most CVEs or vulnerability data that's being reported. Always some great surprises, and I like seeing once in a while too a company name there that I don't recognize, for example, in some of the other reports. So context is everything, but really look at the data. Don't just sort of take claims or inflated. Hey, we're the undisputed leader in this space. Blah blah blah. Try to map it up with some data, whether it be, like I said, from a test lab, a market report, or the qualitative stuff that positions sort of companies and products side by side. And finally, the use case of that. All that has to be blended together before you go make some of these expensive security buying decisions. This is the secret workstation where I do all my blogs from. One of the reports I mentioned this week that's out was the one on hybrid cloud share. I particularly like that one because most of the reports I've seen in the past on market share documents have been around sort of, just broad cloud share, which aren't that helpful. Ones on security tend to be sort of single platforms. So considering today that most organizations are, multi-cloud or hybrid cloud, uh, that was a really good read for me to see that because again, quite often the definitions are very narrow. And also, what those reports often don't talk about is the direction of portability. So considering that if you're an organization who's single cloud today, if you're on-prem only and you're looking to go public cloud, or if you are multi-cloud and you look to expand across those platforms, a lot of the market share reports and a lot of the qualitative ones haven't been sort of much help, I've found in the past. So uh, again, context is everything in use case, but the more the world is going multi-cloud now and hybrid cloud, the more that sort of I'd like to see reports that do that. I think sort of the next phase of that will see even more third-party testing, so the hands-on stuff that goes in that direction. So I look forward to that as well. Even if you're not looking to buy anything right now, just knowing where your investments stand right now, I think has also been really important. So one thing I've always advised sort of customers and colleagues to do is look at what their current investments are, just to see where they're at, to see if this is technology you're good to go with for a while, or has there been some radical changes. So even if you're not in the buying mode, just knowing where sort of the companies that you've invested with, where they stand in the market, and where the overall market is as well. Of course, we're always seeing radical change right now in security, but there can be some really cataclysmic or quick shifts in markets. So some of these market share reports can be useful for finding out where you're at as well. So hopefully you won't have to use these kinds of devices on your current technology. Maybe those are helpful in vendor negotiations as well. That Hammer could get you a 10% discount on software maintenance, I'm sure. So hopefully you found these thoughts on market share and third-party reports helpful. We're living in difficult times in security right now. There's a lot of inflated claims out there, and there's so much information available, a lot of it conflicting. So a lot of these market share and qualitative reports are, certainly things we turn to, but the peer network can't be ignored as well. So when in doubt, consult peers. And by peers, it could be organization size, it could be same vertical, even if the organizations are different, or the technology types you're using. Um, so peer support is great, but at the end of the day, it's going to have to be your decision and your investments that you're going to have to justify to your bosses. So good luck with that. Hopefully these thoughts are helpful. Orange Claxon signing out from an undisclosed location, and hope the rest of your week goes well. So cheers and thanks. What do you mean I'm not going to need a flashlight anymore at night?